What up, everybody? What up? What up? I am Blue. Today, we're going to be talking about how to download files from SharePoint, but we're going to upload them to an Azure Storage blob. So I got a request. I made a video before related to downloading from SharePoint and uploading files to an S3 bucket. So I had a viewer ask me, hey, can you make a video, a similar video, but have it get uploaded to an Azure Storage blob? So I told him, yeah, I'll put a video together. So ultimately, what we're gonna end up doing is I'm gonna end up cloning that project, the SharePoint to S3, and we're gonna make some small tweaks and ultimately just direct it to a storage blob. But before we get started, guys, you give me a like, give me a follow. I appreciate it, man. I really do. Hey, the sponsor of today's video is GoShareIt. Go check them out at GoShareIt.io. It's a sharing platform that allows you to share large and small files, where it makes it very easy to share. Your recipient, all they need is a download link, and they're good to go. All right, guys, let's get started. So I have a empty project right now. I just created a new folder. I just called it Python SharePoint to Azure Blob. Again, don't have no files. So I went through the process already. I created a virtual environment. I installed, there are two packages that we will need. Let me go ahead and bring them up so you could get those installed as well. We're going to need Python Azure Storage Blob. So make sure to install this package. And you're also going to need the SharePoint. So make sure to install this package as well. So again, install those two packages because that's what we're going to be using. Now, because I did mention we're going to be taking, we're going to take source code from the previous project that I made, which is the SharePoint to S3. Let me go to that repo, which is over here. So you can find it under my GitHub account, which is Python download. Nope, this is not it. Which one is it? It's going to be... there it goes. SharePoint files to S3. So we're going to take some of the same files we have here, right? We're going to take our configuration. Let me go ahead and copy this. And then we create a new file in here. We're going to call this config.json. We're going to make some tweaks here. Again, we're not dealing with AWS, but nevertheless, this is our starting point. The next thing that I'm going to copy from here is going to be our SharePoint. Same thing, call it SharePoint.py file. Let's copy that. And then the third thing is going to be our project file. So here's the thing, we're going to be tweaking these files, right? We're going to be making changes to these files. And we'll walk through the process of what those changes consist of and so forth. But I do want to make sure we're pretty much starting with that, starting from there. That's our starting point. And then we'll make the changes that we need. So again, make sure to install those two packages that we talked about, Python, Azure Storage Blob, and SharePoint. Once you get those two installed, let's start off with our configuration file first. So that's going to be our first thing that we tweak. So let's go to our configuration file. So this could stay the same. Okay, again, this is because we're connected to SharePoint. There's nothing different there. What we do want to change is going to be to make it bigger. I want to make sure that it's, there it goes, easy for you to see. What we are going to change is this guy. Like, again, this configuration was more specific for AWS. Well, now we're going to change that where it's more specific for Azure Storage. So we're going to change this to Azure Storage. Okay. Next, our first key is going Key value is going to be Azure account name. Second is going to be Azure access key. And then the third one is going to be container name, right? So those are our three that we're going to have: the account name, access key, and container number. So now that we kind of have this configuration in place, if you're not familiar where to go get this information, let's kind of walk through that real quick. So let me go to my Azure portal. So when you're logged into Azure, go to storage accounts, and in my case, I have 3 accounts right now. So one of them is this guy. It's called SharePoint Test IMLU. So I'm going to click on this storage account. Okay. And if you were to scroll down to where it says security and network, there's a section for access keys. So go ahead and click on that. This is where you will get all your information. See, we have account name here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And this would be my account name. And then if I'm not going to show it, but if you were to click on show key and connection string, this key becomes visible, and then there will be a copy button here. Go ahead and copy that key. That key value would go here. This is where your key would go. And then of course we would have our container name. Our container name would be, if we were to scroll up, see under data storage, we have containers. In this case, I have 5 different containers. So I'm going to put my files into this staging container. So this is going to be the name of my container. It's going to be staging. Now, if you happen to have folders inside that container, like let's say maybe 2022, then January, something of that sort, then just type it out like the way I did, right? Type in / every folder folder pass until you get to the destination where you want your files to drop into. But in my case, I'm just dropping into my staging container, and then my blobs will get created in there. So that's all you got to do. Again, pretty straightforward in my mind to get set up. Easier than AWS, in my opinion. So it's pretty straightforward. So once you got all of that set up, again, up here for your SharePoint, the setup would be similar like the way we did the other video. If you haven't seen the other video, ultimately this is only for Office 365. So if you're utilizing Office, Outlook, SharePoint on-prem, this is not the configuration that would work. But either way, it would be your email account, then of course your password that you use to log into Office 365. And then you would have your URL site. So I think this is where some people get a little bit confused on knowing exactly. So let me kind of show you my SharePoint account, so you kind of get an idea of what it is. So right now, if we look at the URL, see how we have the subdomain, which is imlu, then it's .sharepoint.com. So this section here of the URL is the URL piece that we're going to use. Okay. Now, if I go back, when it comes to site, it's going to be, see where right after that you have sites, then you have the name, then you have a /. So it's going to be whatever name is called. In my case, it's called development. That's, here's the name here as well too. But in your case, it will be whatever that name is. So again, it would be the subdomain, the domain, which is sharepoint.com, sites / then whatever your site name is. So we will copy that. You will paste it in here, and then / as well at the end. So that's that setup. Again, I think some people have got confused on how to configure that. The other piece I think some people get confused is this guy here, the shared documents. So if I go back, the way I normally configure my shared documents, so this doc library is pretty much this section here. Now, as you could tell, I'm not providing anything inside my doc library because I want that to be dynamic, right? But if you did not want it to be dynamic at all, then you could specify the paths. So if I go back to SharePoint, I could specify data 2022, and then of course I have my files. I could do that here as well. I could call this data 2022, but I don't like doing it that way. The reason why is I like to specify the root, the section of my library, which is shared documents. Think of that as the main section for all of your folders in SharePoint. And then from there, you could have many folders, right? Like in my case, I only have one, but you could have 10 folders in here. That's where I like to have it more dynamic, where you will specify what folder you want to access, not through the configuration, but more so through our Python code. You would specify, I want to access this folder and this, subfolder paths. And so like that, you could reuse the code. So leave it blank. Like when I say blank, don't leave it blank, but leave it as is. This do not change, leave it as is. And in our configuration, when we run the projects, you can specify the starting point of your file. And again, I'll show you in a minute. So we'll walk through that process. So hopefully this makes sense on the configuration. Next, we're going to do, I'll put my key in a minute, but just kind of want to walk you through that process. Let me move this to the side because I am going to need it in a few. Let's see. All right, cool. So let's go to our SharePoint. So our SharePoint, there's nothing file. We're not changing nothing, right? We're gonna leave it as is. We're gonna keep it as is. There's one thing we're gonna change, but this is more of my. I should have done it this way to begin with, but I didn't. We're going to bring in pass lib endpoint pure pass. So what this does is it ultimately is a better way to join directory paths and files together. The way I did it right here, this only works for Windows, strictly Windows only, but it doesn't work for Mac or Linux if people run my code on a Mac or Linux. In order to make it more normalized to work on all operating systems, I should have used pure paths to begin with, and that's my mistake. But what that does, it builds your paths based on the operating system that you're using. So if you're using Mac or Linux, it builds it in the Mac Linux format, which is / or compared to / and so on. Where Windows, the slashes are different. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just kind of, compare the two. So it will be config pass, pure pass, and then literally would be root directory. Then it would be, in this case, config JSON. That's it. That's the replacement here. So these two do the same thing. The only difference is pure pass does it in the format that works for your operating system, whether it be Mac, Linux, Windows, doesn't matter. All right, so now that I have this, I could remove that out the way. But that's the only changes that we're doing here. Okay, so now I don't need nothing else from here. Now we're going to go to our project file. So this file, there's going to be a good amount of changes that we're going to do. Like for one, we don't need this. This was strictly for AWS. Since we're not dealing with AWS no more, we don't need it no more. So that's gone. For Azure, it is called from Azure, storage, blob, import, blob, client. Okay, again, this is all part of your Azure Storage blob package that we installed earlier. Okay, so now that we have that, there's a few changes that I noticed as well that we're changing. It has nothing to do with AWS or Azure. It has more to do on the way it was working. The way it was working before is it downloads from SharePoint, but it saves it locally on your hard drive, and then it takes those files, reads it again, then uploads it to S3. Well, there's no need to download, save, and then re-upload. What we need to do, just as we download and we have that object in memory, we're just going to take that object and then send it straight to the blob. So because of that, we don't need this. We don't need this local or remote folder destination. This argument here was, where do you want to save the file that you're going to download from SharePoint? Well, we don't want to save them because we're going to keep them in memory. So there's no need to save them nowhere on your hard drive. So I'm going to remove that, which means ultimately now we're only going to have 3 arguments total. And I need to change these as well, the index from 2, 3. Okay. Same thing here with the configuration. We need to bring in from passlib import purepass, and then we're going to replace this purepass, but it's not a list format, so I need to take that away. So there you go, we have our directory pass in our file. Boom, that's good. Also, now what we're gonna do is, see how when we're reading this configuration, we're reading the AWS bucket. Well, that's not what we're doing no more. Now we're reading the Azure Storage. You know, that's the key. So I'm gonna replace it with Azure Storage, and ultimately all of these will go away. We don't need none of these no more. I'm gonna delete all of those, and I'm gonna replace it with the Azure names, the Azure keys, which would be Azure account name, Azure access key, and container name, right? So in this case, it would be config container name config Azure access key, oops, and config Azure account name. Because again, these are the keys over here. So ultimately, these values are going to get assigned to these variables right here that we're going to use in a process. Okay, so now that we have that in place, see how we have this upload to S3? We don't need that because we're not uploading to S3 no more. So this could go away. I'm going to delete this. We're going to replace it with function used for Azure Storage. Okay, so we're going to create another function here. But before we do that, let me kind of go through the process and clean up the other stuff. So this was specific for AWS as well. Bucket subfolder build. Well, we're not building the subfolders because we don't have that need here. So this is going to get deleted as well. Again, that was strictly for AWS. Same thing for save file. We're not saving the file no more because remember what was happening before in the original source code. We're downloading from SharePoint, saving it on the local machine, and then we reread the files and then we upload it to AWS S3. Well, there's no need for that. In reality, since we're already downloading the file from SharePoint, we have that object in memory. Since we have it in memory, we could just go ahead and take that object and then pass it through to upload directly to S3. So there's no need to even save. It's one of those deals where the more I thought about it, I looked at the code, I was like, yeah, it doesn't make sense to do that. So this is fine. SharePoint download files. Yep. Again, we're not saving nothing no more, so we're going to remove this save action. We don't need to build a file directory pass no more because that was more so to be able to read the files locally, but we're not reading it no more. It's already in memory. And then this file name was more so to generate our file name for, we were dealing with subfolders, which we're not doing. We don't have to do that in Azure Blob. So this is going to get removed. And then on top of that, we're going to have a new function here, not this guy. So this could actually go away. And we'll update this in a minute. We're going to have to add this new function that we create over here. I'm just trying to go through and clean up all the stuff that we don't need. This could stay the same. That could stay the same. So all of this could stay the same. So now what we're going to end up doing is we're going to create our new function. So our new function is going to be called, what do we call it? Upload file to blob. And it's going to take into arguments. So in this case, it's going to be file object. Because again, we're not reading. There's no need to read a file or nothing. We're just taking in the object of the file. Then we need to bring in the file name. Okay. Okay. So within here, we're gonna create a blob object, and this is where we're gonna end up calling our blob client. Okay. And then we're gonna call the method, which is what is called from connection string. Okay, so we're gonna have a few arguments here. One of them is going to be called connection string. The other one is going to be called container name, and then the third one is going to be called, my bad, not third one, we got 4. So the third one is going to be the blob name. And then the last one is going to be credentials. Okay. So now let's start populating. Well, what's all of this here, right? Everything that we need to populate. There's one thing that I forgot that we need to do up here, which is, see how we have our connection string? We need to build that connection string. So we're going to create another variable. We're gonna have another object here, which is going to be called Azure Connect String. Now this is going to be a combination of, so like if you're familiar with databases, you have just, you specify the database, the username, password, all of that in your connection string. It's very similar to what this is here. So in this case, let me go ahead and kind of copy what I do have already, kind of speed up the process. So let's take a look at it real quick. Let me close this out so we can take a look at it. It's a bit long. So we have our default endpoint protocol, and then in this case HTTPS. Then we have our account name, which again, this is our account name up here from a configuration file. Account key, same thing, coming from our configuration file. Our endpoint is just core.windows.net. All right, so that's pretty much is building our Azure connection string, and that's where down here, that's where we're going to end up, calling that Azure connection string. And then under container name, we're going to end up calling the container name object. And then under blob name, so remember, blob name is same as your file name. So if you're downloading, let's say 5 files, this has to be a variable, has to be unique. And this is why we're passing in file name over here and as a argument, because this is going to be our file name. When we save it out to the blob, we want it to save under the same file name. If you don't want it to be under the same file name, or you want to like modify it, then of course you could do stuff like maybe you want to add, for example, whatever the file name is, but then you want to add to it. Maybe you want to add a some sort of date time aspect at the end or whatever. You could do that, but in this case I'm just saving it with the same file name, based on what was in SharePoint. Then for credentials, this is going to be Azure access key. That's our credentials right there. So ultimately this generates a connection to our blob, which is specifying a file name. Now what we're going to need to do is, we need to provide, what is it that we're going to save, right? Like we created the connection, we have a file name established, but now we need to pass in some kind of data to, to save to this blob. And that's where we're going to call the upload method, which would be blob upload blob. And in this case, it would be file object. Again, that's where we're passing in over here. This file object, that's where we're going to end up saving to this blob. And that's it. That's all we would have to do here, nothing else, and we're done. So it's pretty straightforward. So now that we created this new function for the upload piece to Azure, but we need to add that in our get files section. Because what we're doing here is, this is where we're getting the files, and we have our file object. So now we're gonna have to pass this. We're gonna end up calling our upload files to blob. We're gonna pass the file object that we have there, and then we're gonna end up passing in the file name as well as an argument, right? File name, which again we need because we're trying to save under the same file name. So now that we have that established, let's see. I think that's it, man. I think we're good to go. So let me kind of go back to the SharePoint just because we can see everything in action. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you on how to do this as your argument, but I'm going to be calling the data 2022 folder, and I want to be able to pull all of these files, download all of these files, then upload it to my blob, my Azure Storage. Right, that's what I want to do. That's the goal. You could tell I'm dealing with two different formats, CSV and Excel. Okay. And my pass here is not documents. Again, when they're documents is kind of, think of that as the root pass, which is part of the configuration. So as I specify here, where it says shared documents, think of this as being the starting point, which is this guy, this document section here. After you come to this the root pass for your SharePoint, then you have your first folder, which is data, and then of course 2022, and that's what I'm going to be passing in, data 2022, as one of my arguments of this is the folder that I want to pull data from to ultimately upload to S3, right? So what I'm going to do next now, let me put in my credentials here, my email, password, and my Azure access key. And yeah, then we'll test it out, make sure that it works. So let me go ahead and do that right quick. All right, cool. Let me go back, share my screen. All right, so now that I have my configuration completed with my credentials, now I should be able to run this. And what should happen, again, it literally should download file from SharePoint. It's not going to save it locally. It just keeps it in memory, and then it uploads it directly to blob. And let's go to our storage, our Azure Storage, to make sure that it does load properly. So if you could tell right now, I'm under storage accounts. This is a SharePoint. This is the my account, which is SharePoint test I am Lou. Then inside here, I have a staging, because that's what I specified in my configuration. I want my container name to be staging. So I'm going to click on staging, and I have no data here. Right here, refresh, no data. So now when I run it, what should happen is I'm going to run Python. Let me clear this out just to make it bigger. All right, cool. Let me make this bigger because it's pretty small. So I'm going to end up calling, again, activate your environment. So I have my environment activated, which is the env Python project. So remember, we have three arguments. We got rid of one, we don't need no more, but we have three arguments here. We have folder name. This is a SharePoint. If we look at the description, SharePoint folder name may include subfolders. So in my case is YouTube 2022, or really in my case it's called data 2022, right? That's my starting point. So again, if I go back, as you could tell, it's not documents. You don't need to specify documents. It's gonna be the first folder in here, which is data 2022. Next, I'm gonna hit space. The next section is SharePoint file name. If I'm trying to download like one specific file, well, I'm not trying to download one file. I want to download many files. But assuming that you just want to download one file only, then you could just specify like file.csv if that's the case. But in my case, that's not the case. I want to download all files, so I'm going to call this none. That's going to be my argument. Third argument here is file name patterns. So if I go back, and here's a good example. See how I have this pattern of customer February, customer January, but then this one says sample CSV file. So let's say I just wanted to download the customer files only. Then what I could do for argument 3, I could specify customer. And it's going to look for that pattern and only download files that contain the customer name in the file name. So just keep that in mind. You could provide a pattern argument if you're trying to download specific files. In my case, I want to download all files, so I'm going to specify none. Once I do that, I think we're good, man. Everything seems good. I think we're good. Let's give it a test and see what happens. No such file, blah, blah, blah. What happened here? Oops. I forgot to specify project.py. So that's my mistake. So let's go back to project.py. Now let's run it again. Cross fingers. Does it work? Does it not work? What do we get? No errors so far. Is it going to work? First try. Oh, no errors. That's good. So now let's go to let's go to our storage. So I'm going to hit refresh. Boom, we have our 4 files in there. So again, we're able to connect to our SharePoint, download these 4 files, and then we end up uploading it to a specific container in a specific storage account, and then the file got dropped into that container. Again, guys, hopefully this helps out. I got a request from somebody, and you could tell what we did. We took code that we had already for another project, and we just kind of did some small modifications to it. One of the big changes that we did here, in a way, was the download and then saving it locally, then reread the file and then re-upload it. There was no need to add that piece there. When I reviewed the code earlier today, I saw that. In my mind, I was thinking, like, why the hell did I do it that way? It makes no sense. So of course, got rid of it, and it works, right? Just keep it in memory, and then we send it on over to the destination. So again, hopefully this helps. If you have any requests, let me know. You know, you can send me an email at contact@iamlu.net. And I'll try to make some more videos, man, based on the requests that I've been getting. Again, guys, give me a like, give me a follow, and peace.